What if you're a little bit lost in life, trying to find a way forward, trying to overcome the hurdles that you need to do, trying to make that income that you want to live the life the way you want to do it? What are the things that you need to do to take those steps forward? And life can have some pretty simple instructions, but how do you take those steps? What do you need to do? Enjoy this podcast as we talk with Jeevan Matharu as he talks through how to become a person of value.
Welcome to eSHAIR.care, an all-inclusive community sharing experience, strength, and hope to create strong, healthy, and inspiring relationships. eSHAIR.care communities work toward every individual feeling safe, valued, and heard, free from the threat of danger, pain, or harm. Each episode, founder Damian Andrews explores the principles underpinning eSHAIR.care and invites expert special guests to share their knowledge so you can easily reap the benefits so many others experience. You hold the choice to create your future. Let it be with strong, healthy, and inspiring relationships.
Hello and welcome to eSHAIR. Here we discuss, promote, and share the benefits to all from living in an egalitarian society, including men. Inaccurate propaganda leads some men to believe that they miss out with equality. The reality, suppressing women is detrimental to men. Creating a world where everyone can contribute equally makes everyone better off. Now today, it's my great pleasure to welcome Jeevan Matharu, author and a transformational coach and financial advisor and retirement planner. He's a member of Mensa, but he was expelled from a private school. He enjoys reading about Stoicism, if I pronounced that correctly, and I might have fluffed that up, but I'll keep going, and believes that we need to ask ourselves the right question. His first book, Become a Person of Value, helps real people reach their full potential. Welcome, Jeevan.
Thank you very much for having me on the show, Damian. It's going to be a pleasure.
Yeah, it is. It's a great pleasure to have you on. You've done so many different things and you've got so much energy. Do you want to jump in the time machine, the DeLorean, and hit 88 miles an hour, go back in time and talk to us about a couple of challenges that you went through that you needed to overcome that led you to what you're doing now?
Well, I think you sort of alluded to it in your introduction there in terms of getting kicked out of private school. I think that it's like a case of having a Ferrari, isn't it? You've got a Ferrari, but you don't know how to drive it. You don't know how to handle a car that powerful. You don't know how to drive a manual or a stick. You're driving on the wrong hand side of the car, essentially. Yeah. So that sort of was something that I found when I was younger. That I had the IQ, I had the intellect, but I didn't have the attitude, the mentality, the goal setting, the long-term view. Maybe didn't hang around with the right people socially. Was probably more interested in entertainment rather than education, because I think that with any consumption of information is either going to be entertainment or education, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I think that I was more in the entertainment space than education. Now, what I came to realise over the years is that it's not just about ability; it's about putting that ability into practice. It's like the same as people say knowledge is power. Knowledge isn't power until it's applied. It's the same exact sentiment, really. Yeah. So that's one of the major challenges I've overcome, is to get myself into a good position mentally and understand that you have to have a focus, even if you're failing, even if it's not going well. That's not the whole point, really. The point is to have the persistence, have the consistency, so that you are working towards a goal and aiming or striving to be the best version of yourself. So I think that was quite a big obstacle for me, especially, as I said, being thrown out of school and basically starting again. And to be honest, having been kicked out of school, that immediately didn't change my perspective until even maybe a decade later, because your subconscious sometimes takes time to absorb information and change the trajectory, change the setting of the sail. And probably, until mid-20s, I would say I didn't really change 100%, but within that time frame, there was small incremental changes that led to sort of where I am today. That's probably the major one, I would say, that's been the most difficult to overcome.
Yeah. So being thrown out of school, as you said, that was the attitude. Because there's a story of, was it Michael Jordan, and I know you referenced Michael Jordan in your book. Is it, because he was, when he was younger, he was really talented at basketball, but the coach kicked him off the team and said, "We're not going to take you on the team because you haven't got the right attitude." Was that kind of a similar thing for you? It was learning, okay, because you mentioned consistency there, because there are certain predictors of success. Consistency is one of those. Was that partly because of goals and a vision that you had? Because you mentioned you didn't have goals as well. Do you think that, having written the book that you've written, drawing from that, do you think goals is really important to help people stay focused on things like doing the right behaviors, as opposed to, as you say, doing things not maximizing their potential?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that let's use a very tangible example. If you were to jump into a taxi and look at the driver, and the driver says, "Where are you going?" and you say, "I'm not sure," he's going to run up a big bill, isn't he? Because he's
Yeah.
going to drive you to London, to Glasgow, to probably across the channel somewhere to Paris. There's not going to be any direction there.
Yeah.
So in order to have that Uber or taxi driver drive you to the location that you're after, you need to first of all know where it is you want to go,
Mm.
and then you plan out the route. So coming back to Michael Jordan or many other stories for that matter, there was obviously disparity there between the goals, which we'll come on to talk about in a second, and the ability, because
Mm.
you have to have an ability, but you also have to have the drive, determination, and passion, and there has to be a sort of they have to match up and marry up. Because if you're very passionate about something but you aren't good at it, you ain't going to get anywhere either. But if you're very good at something but aren't passionate about it, you're not going to get anywhere. Um, on the flip side, so there has to be a marriage between the two. So there's a couple of ways that you can change someone's mindset. There's inspiration, there's desperation, there's
Mm.
using the carrot, there's using the stick, and it's trying to understand your own mentality and understand what's going to drive you to get there. So goals, to bring this back round to the goal setting, it's not just the setting of goals that's going to get you anywhere. It's like I could say, oh, okay, well, I've got a goal to travel to the moon in 2023 by October. Now, that me just focusing on that goal alone is not going to be enough. What the goal does is it gives you a process to follow in order to get there. So we'll take the moon one out of the equation because that's a bit far-fetched. But let's say that by October I want to be a marathon runner.
Mm.
The goal of running a marathon in October will make me reverse engineer the steps I need to get or need to take in order to get there.
Yeah.
So it might be that, okay, what do I need to do by the end of February? Probably need to be able to run at least a few miles, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then by March, by April, by June, July, August, etc., there needs to be a trajectory. And you'll end up reviewing the process, won't you? Or reviewing the targets that you've hit and say, okay, well, by this point, where are things? Do I need to be working harder? Do I need to rest more? Do I maybe need to change how I'm actually preparing? Do I need to change the regime? Do I need to change my diet? So all of these things. And the same would have been for Michael Jordan. He would have been like, well, if my percentages are very low, do I need to throw more free throws? Do I need to do any sportsman, Roger Federer, do I need to do more serving, more backhands, more forehand? And it's something that I've spoke about before. People talk about all the time. I need to work on my weaknesses. Now, I think that number one, weakness is a bad word because I think it should be called an area of required improvement because that is a more positive way of looking at things. But that aside, there are related weaknesses and unrelated weaknesses. So we'll use the example of a tennis player. If you're a tennis player and you've got a good serve, you've got a good forehand, but your backhand isn't good, that's a related weakness because it's related to your primary goal of becoming a tennis player. So that's something that you should work on, okay? What you shouldn't be doing is working on Pythagoras' theorem because you don't understand it and you're not very good at it. That's an unrelated weakness. It's not going to get you any closer to your goal. So I think that's where there's a big discrepancy there of what people understand as work on your weakness and working on a weakness related to your goal that's holding you back. So, for example, judo for me at the moment, I'm working on my gripping because that's something that's stopping me from getting to the next level. Like the aggression I've got, that's fine. Fitness is okay, but again, that's probably an area I need to work on. And my throws are okay as well, but it's the gripping, the setup. So if I'm focusing on those areas, it will elevate the rest of my game, because that's a related weakness. It's no good for me to go out and cycle, because, you know, I'm not that good at cycling, let's say, and cycling uphill because it's something that I'm not the best at. It's not related to my primary goal. So I think that's coming back to what you said before, and use Michael Jordan as an example. We need to, as individuals, understand where we need to get to, and then understand what we need to incorporate in order to get there.
Yeah. Okay. It's an interesting point that you raised there. From that perspective of setting those goals, and going back to when you were kicked out of school, what is it, because I imagine that wasn't a great thing to happen. You're obviously in a private school, so, that wasn't, there was an expense there. I'm guessing your parents weren't that happy that you got kicked out of school. But from there, you mentioned, said it took about 10 years to realize what you needed to realize. What does someone need to go through to get to that point of going, hey, maybe I need to readjust? Do they have to go through a lot of pain, or do they? Because some people go through a lot of pain. Other people seem to not. They realize fairly quickly. What do you think it is that trigger that people have to go through to go, all right, I need to set some goals and put that commitment into achieving them?
I think it's very difficult to assess one individual thing, because everyone's different. One, it might be that you see results and there's no results there, so you're like, well, hang on a minute. If I'm doing what I'm doing and there's no results, do I need to change something?
Yeah.
It might be that you hear something or read something that changes your perspective. Is it that you read something or you listen to something, or you become inspired by somebody that changes your action? Or is it out of desperation? Because they're the two ends of the spectrum, aren't they? You've got 100% inspiration and you've got 100% desperation, where, you're going to be out in the streets unless you do something.
Yeah.
So I think that comes from a mentality perspective of, well, how much do you want it? And are you willing to sacrifice things in order to get there? Because for everyone who it has reached a good level, they've sacrificed some things. They maybe haven't gone out drinking with their friends and socialising because they've got to knuckle down and do their physical exercise. They've got to do the writing of the book. They've got to do the reading. They've got to do the practice for their stand-up comedy or whatever it's going to be.
Yeah.
And it's those decisions that, and for me, I try to, and look, I'm not perfect, I'm not saying I am, but what I'll try to do is, when I am undertaking actions that I don't like, for some reason, not that I don't like them, but understand that it's painful and it's part of the process, I don't think about the process, I think about the end goal. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm doing all these things because of this. And because I'm a carrot chaser as opposed to a disciplinarian, I'm not looking at it as like, well, you don't want this, you don't want this. I'm saying, well, I want this, and this is how you sort of act. It comes back to, the psychological theory of operant conditioning.
Yeah.
You get positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, and within those you get positive and negative reinforcement, if that makes sense. So if someone's been naughty, you can either give them a slap around the face, so you give them something bad, or you can take something away from them that they see as good. So you can take away their PlayStation, and both of those are going to change their behaviour. The same as on the positive side. If someone's done something good, you can say, well, we'll give you £10, $10. But you can also give them, take something away from them they don't like. So you can say, well, actually, you've been good today. We're not going to give you £10, but what we're going to do is going to ensure that you don't have to do the chores today. You don't have to do the chores. And that can help to manage behaviour. And yes, it's good to understand that, to manage other people, but it's also good to manage yourself, isn't it, on that basis? Because if you know how you operate and you know what's going to motivate you to work, you can maybe start to adjust the sail. And everyone's got inherent fears, haven't they? They have imposter syndrome. Like, for example, both myself and yourself, if you had the imposter syndrome of saying, well, I don't feel that I'm really informed enough to start a podcast. Who am I? Damien, I'm a no one. Same with me, Jeevan. You know what? I'm not really anyone, really. I was thrown out of school and not really anyone. I don't really have much to give. If I think like that, I'm not going to start a podcast.
Yeah.
I'm not going to put information forward. If I've got a fear of failure, again, I'm not going to to do anything because I'm so scared of the failure? Have I got a fear of success? Have I got fear of being judged? All these things that we need to understand about ourselves in order to adjust the sale, as to rephrase the question, or reframe the question. Basically, adjusting the sale comes from all of that which I've just mentioned, because adjusting the sale isn't just based on, oh, we need to adjust it by 2% north, south, east, or west, or any combination of the four. It comes from the underlying understanding of those elements that I've just mentioned, in order to understand where to set the sale. Because as with any decision, you'll see this in boardroom meetings. They take on 10 senior managers who all understand the hundreds of people that work beneath them to come forward with some information to then everyone figure that information out, for then the CEO to make a decision based on all of that. So there has to be a lot of information in order to change something. And if you treat yourself as a business, that's what I would say. Understand how you operate, what's your personality type, what are you scared of, what are your fears, and what do you feel adjusting the sale will get you in terms of results or inner peace or whatever it's going to be. Understanding yourself is quite important, and I think a good way to do that, to try and understand who you are, is to spend a bit more time in solitary. Now, that doesn't mean loneliness, because loneliness is not out of choice. So if you're a lonely person, generally, it means that you are lonely because you want interaction, but you're not able to get it because people don't like you or whatever else. Solitary, outside of the prison sort of wording, solitary is where you basically withdraw yourself in order to have less distractions. Because if you're out with your friends all the time, you're going to absorb some of their mindset. You're going to be in a social setting, so you're not going to have time to think. All these sorts of things. Whereas when you spend time alone, you become more like who you are and understand your own perspective, really. Which, again, I think coming back to when I was younger, I was always doing things and in school and stuff, and you don't get time to really think and reflect that maybe you should do. And is it down to me? Is it down to people who manage me at school? Maybe they didn't ask me the right questions, because, again, I'm a strong believer that questions, like, have you seen the film Inception before?
I've seen that a little while ago, but I did see that. But you do mention in your book that asking the right questions is the thing. So do you want to expand on that? Because that was a question I had about what are the right questions? How do you know what the right questions are?
Well, it's not necessarily. Okay, we'll come on to the right questions, but in terms of the power of asking questions as opposed to telling someone. So imagine I'm at school, and the teacher, this is what they normally say: you need to behave, you need to do your work, you need to do this, you need to do this, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
As individuals, we don't actually really like being told what to do. No. We like to have the idea for ourselves. So like Inception, whereby instead of trying to tell people stuff, you plant ideas deep in the subconscious so they have the idea to act. What teachers should have maybe said to me is, okay, Jeevan, we'll sit you down. Okay, so what do you want to be in the future? Okay, I might have said, I don't know, I want to be, okay, we'll use a very generic example. I want to be a doctor. Okay, you want to be a doctor, that's fine. You've got the intelligence to be a doctor, that's fine. Do you know what grades does a doctor need to get to go into university? Oh, but they need straight A's and A stars. Okay. What are your grades at that level at this moment? I would be like, no. Okay, so if you want to be a doctor and your grades aren't at that level, are you ever going to become a doctor? No. How's that going to make you feel? What do you think you need to do in order to get those grades, etc.? That's much more powerful, because I'm the one who's actually said those things. Oh, I need to work harder in order to get those grades to become a doctor. You have to make the other person say it. And that's the whole point. Obviously, I'm a transformational coach. That's the whole idea. It's not for me to say, Damien, you need to move from Australia to the States, get a job in stockbroking in New York. It's to ask you what you feel that you need to do. Because a lot of people can't ask themselves those questions. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's a school programming system that because when you're children, you ask your parents, what time are we going to be there? Why is this happening? Well, who's that? What's this? What's that? How does this work? But I think school discourages you from asking questions, because if you ask questions, you look stupid. You aren't doing what you're told, because you should just basically learn what you're told and regurgitate it. That is praised, and that is positive reinforcement.
Yeah.
Asking questions and questioning this narrative isn't, as I said, you look stupid socially, you might look dumb, you might be asking a question that's irrelevant, all these sorts of things. So we sort of get out of the questioning phase, which I feel that we need to get back into, because there's a lot we can learn from kids, and questioning is one of them.
It's really powerful what you said there, and I know from my own experience that works, because with my son, I had a similar sort of thing when he was younger. Noticed he was just it was just something that triggered about the way he was approaching school, and I thought, well, I'll ask him. I said, "Do you know why you're going to school?" He goes, "No." And so I explained to him, do you see what I do and earn money, and explained that process of, you get that education to do that. And I asked him, did he understand that? And he said yes. Um, and I asked him what grades he wanted to get. And he set a mark, which was, it was high, but it wasn't the highest. But, as, as a parent, you're always wanting the best. But what happened was, and he was a little bit behind because it wasn't his fault that he was behind. It was, things that were happening in the family as a result, resulted in affecting his grades. But he set the grade that he wanted to get. And then he moved beyond that. He eventually, he was getting A's and A's pluses, which wasn't his goal, but he actually got past it. But the point was, I wasn't demanding, you've got to do this and you've got to study, you've got to do that. I was always asking the question. Same token, it's exactly what you're saying. Sometimes I'll notice him doing something and say, "Have you done the study?" And sometimes he has. Most of the time he has. Sometimes he hasn't. And then you go, "Oh yeah, I need to do that." And asking those questions. But how do you become aware of that? How do you notice that, okay, I need to ask myself, different questions?
Well, again, it comes back to the situation that you're in. If you don't like where you work, the question is, well, why am I working here? What career do I want? What salary would I like? What value can I bring to the workplace? Am I living in the right location? All these sorts of things. So I think inherently we know what's going well and what isn't going well for us. Yeah. We know that. We don't really need anyone to tell us that. Do you know what? I'm probably drinking too much, or I'm probably smoking too much. Not good for me. But the problem is that you get what's called a confirmation, not confirmation bias. Something similar. I can't remember the name of it at this point, but it's basically where let's say you smoke cigarettes. You learn that cigarettes smoking is bad for you.
Yeah.
So you're going to do, it's called cognitive dissonance, that's it. So you learn that smoking is bad for you.
Yeah.
You're going to do one of two things. You're either going to stop smoking because you've learned that smoking is bad for you, or you're going to change, you're going to basically say that the information that you gathered is incorrect and that actually smoking isn't bad for you, and continue to smoke. So it's cognitive dissonance. And I feel that that's essentially what happens to individuals, that they either understand that they're in a bad place and that they need to change, or they just live in their own little world and are sort of partially delusional that everything's fine, everything's okay, I don't need to act. And then they'll keep running that same program 2 years, 5 years, and then 6, 7 years in, they're like, maybe I do need to change. But there'll always come a time when you have that realization. And the only thing I can say is that it's better to have the realization earlier than later. Definitely. Like if I'd have had this realization now or whenever it was, at age 6, different ball game altogether.
Yeah.
Do you wish things changed? No, because yes, everyone can say, well, I wish I'd done this at university, I wish I'd done this. It's very easy to say that, but you wouldn't be who you are today without all of the experiences that you've had. So I wouldn't change it, but if that makes sense. But
100%.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I was going to say 100%, because a lot of times you ask people, if you could change one thing in history, what would it be? And people, a lot of the times people say, I'd go back in time and kill Hitler. And when you go on faces that might seem like a great thing, but when you look at all the displacement that happens, chances are majority of people that are alive today wouldn't be born, because people wouldn't relate the way they were, and so many. I mean, when you think about inception and how the sperm has to enter, the right sperm has to enter the egg at the right time to create that personality, and if all that displacement didn't happen, majority of people wouldn't exist today. Do you want to go back and change that? Is that that's a big moral dilemma when you think about it. To cease to exist to stop World War II. and you're right, you can't go back and change things, and you don't know what the flow and effect is going to be from that. But from that perspective, we talk about your journey. You went from, so you're kicked out of school. What did you do after that? I mean, I'm guessing you hadn't finished school at that point in time. Did you, what was the next steps for you? And because you went on to be a financial advisor, so that would have taken education, and obviously you're an intelligent guy, but you still need the education and the certificates to do that. Talk us through that process as to how you went from getting kicked out of school to becoming a financial advisor.
Well, I'll just touch on what you said about Hitler before I answer that, because I think this caught something quite interesting there.
Yeah.
When you change something in the past, or something doesn't happen, sometimes amplified in the future. So if you don't make mistakes early, so if Hitler hadn't done what he did, and I'm not advocating for it, maybe it'll be a time in 500 years, 1,000 years later, where something 10 times worse would have happened in a very similar vein. So, for example, me getting kicked out of school and doing things like drinking and going out messing around, in some ways, it's good that you've done it early.
Yeah,
and it's sort of flipping over what I said previously, that it's good to get your head screwed on early. But I know people who have, from their parents, have drilled them down, and not letting them go out, making revise every night, make sure that they're focusing on their studies. And like the males, when they get a bit older and they get the freedom, they're going out doing coke, drinking every night, prostitutes, all this sort of stuff. And the girls, on the flip side, they're not allowed out to meet boys. When they get older and they're allowed to go out and meet boys, they turn very promiscuous. So I think sometimes when you want to try and like Hitler change something, you don't understand the ramifications later on. So I think sometimes that it's better to make the mistakes early and accepting, in that case, than they're being sort of amplified in the future. To come on to your question specifically now, in relation to after school. So went to school, did A-levels, again, underperformed, still did okay, of course, went to university, again, underperformed, got a 2-1 just, because in the first 2 years I messed around at university, but in the first 3 years, because first year actually didn't do anything, just went out every night for the first whole year, literally. Changed universities, to start again, basically. First 2 years of that university, messed around still. And then the third year, I was like, I can't be a guy who's going to get a 2-2 at university. I was like, I can't. I've already lost my chance to get a first because of, again, those results. But I sat down, and this is where I actually started to think and plan correctly. I was like, okay, let's actually use my initiative here. What grade do I need to get a 2-1 overall? Which obviously needs to be fairly high to bring the grade up. And I said, so I worked that. Okay, fine. Okay, so now, which of the modules are the highest weighted? And then of those modules, which is it the coursework? Is it the exam? What's the weightings exactly? So I worked out which parts were the most important, how I should focus my time, so I allocated all the times, etc. So what I basically realised was that I would not go to lectures, not go to seminars. I would spend all my time on the courseworks. To give me maximum chance of good grades. And then when it came to the end of the year, all of the lectures and seminars were uploaded onto the Blackboard site. Then I would sort of binge all of that and learn all of that. So basically focusing on two separate parts. And again, on the modules, I ended up getting a 2-1 by, my sort of snick of the nose, let's say. But whatever you put your mind to, you can achieve. And when I started, again, after that, got a job in financial services after the accountancy stint, which I didn't enjoy. Got a good paid job, full time, benefits, mileage, all that sort of stuff, and decided to do that for myself as a financial advisor as well, which I still do alongside the transformational coaching. But anything that happens to you, you have to learn and develop from it. So I've actually come to a conclusion now that for kids, it's actually quite important to understand what type of person you are and what your personality type is. Because if you're an extrovert, sales jobs probably aren't your best bet. If you're an extrovert, you probably aren't best sitting in front of a laptop all day. So there's got to be a balance there, because Monday mornings are actually the highest rate of heart attacks, and that's because you've got many fishes climbing trees. So if you're in a job that you hate, what is it again, this is where questions come in. What is it you hate? Is it the business? Is it your manager? Is it the actual job itself? Is it the industry? Is it the pay? What is it?
Yeah.
Because once you understand that, you can then start to sort of design your life in future. So, like, the first question of my new book that's coming out, that's a sort of guided journal, is where do you want to be in 3 to 5 years' time? If you can't answer that, it's very difficult to set the sail, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's very difficult to plan that far. Well, for some people, it's difficult to plan that far to an extent because a lot of things can happen. But you need to have a general direction, because even if you've got a general direction that turns out to be completely incorrect,
yeah,
you're at least heading in a direction. It's like I don't know exactly what it was, but it was like a king essentially. He had all of his advisors in one room. He had all the advisors in a room, and there was also a kid there. And the advisor was telling him, right, there's 2 paths, there's left and a right path. We think you should go for the left path for this reason, right path for this reason, etc., etc. All the information. And after a while, he just goes, right, we're going to take the left path. And the kid came up to him and goes, excuse me, can I ask you why you decided to take the left path? Because you've not really heard all the information yet. You sort of just jumped to a conclusion. He says, look, at the end of the day, I'm going to find out a lot faster which is the right path by going down this left path than waiting for all this information to be told to me. Because by the time I got halfway down, I can either see this is the right path and I'm already down that path a lot faster, or I turn back and realise that was the wrong path. So sometimes you can have more information and paralysis analysis, or paralysis by analysis, and that can be the case as well. Sometimes you've got to go for something, and you'll realise along the way that, you'll end up like a funnel. You go down the funnel, and you'll then come out the funnel, and you're like, okay, we need to readjust. So yeah, sometimes you just need to act and pick a direction.
Yeah, it's an interesting point that you mentioned there, because I know that from experience. One of the CEOs I know through a friend, you've probably got them over in the UK, where you have the car sales websites. Well, we've got one here called carsales.com, which is the biggest one. And the CEO of that said, same thing. He said, if we had waited till we try and worked everything out and got it all right, we never would have launched. So we launched it and worked out what we were doing as we, obviously they had a decent plan sorted out, but they launched, and then they took the feedback, adjusted things, and went forward. Is that what you're saying? It's better just to have a good idea of where you're going, and take action, and then look at the feedback you're getting and adjust as you're going, adjusting your sales. You've mentioned sales a few times. Is that?
Yeah. I mean, even if you look at, again, personal example, the book, my first one. So you have to have a general idea to start something. So the house that you're living in, it was designed in the mind of an architect first. It was then drawn out on paper. It was built, and here you are, and you've decorated it.
Yeah.
Same with, I had a rough idea for the book. I had sort of the chapters I was going to build, etc. But then when you're actually in the situation, you will adjust things accordingly. Nothing massive. It might be that it's like the decoration in the house. It might be the decoration slightly different, or you might have moved a door around or gone open plan downstairs.
Yeah.
But the general idea is there. So you mentioned the car sales website. He wouldn't have started it unless he knew he was going to do a car sales website.
Yeah, correct.
The kinks he's worked out along the way.
Yeah.
But you have to have active, you have to have activity in order to make adjustment, because you can't say, well, what would happen in this situation is I'd do this, and this situation I'd do this, because that's where sort of overthinking comes in.
Yeah.
It's like with judo, for example, there's certain throws and there's certain things that can happen, but if you can't just learn from a book first, everything, and then go and do it. You have to learn by doing, and then you start reading, because your understanding then understands how to apply that thing.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Because if you read something 100%. And you understand it, you can apply it. If you can read things, I've read the same thing like 5 or 6 times. I can't actually think of an example at this point, but I've read like the same thing or watched the same video 5 or 6 times. But the 3rd or 4th time is a completely different video for me, because my level of understanding of that particular topic is a lot higher, and it makes much more sense than just sort of rote learning stuff, or basically being a parrot, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well,
Because
there's a
understanding
component.
and knowing something is different.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing
Right.
from you, what you're saying is that there's a component of conscious understanding because and unconscious action, because we act unconsciously. So you can learn it, you can read the book all you want, but you haven't actually got the full understanding of it because you've only got one element of knowledge, where there's the other element of knowledge where you've actually got to do something, and that gives you further knowledge. But then if you're even going to act, because we've all done things where we've thought we've understood something and completely messed it up and it wasn't integrated at an unconscious level. Then we've done the opposite, where we've didn't think we understood it and performed really well. They're two different things. Is that where you're getting to with that? Is it's you've got to actually go out and do that that allows it to sink into your unconscious mind as part of your behaviors and habits?
Yeah, exactly. You've got to go down the revolving door, don't you? You've got to
Mm,
act, reflect, act, reflect, act, reflect, act, reflect. And
yeah.
the information that you're going to pick up by acting, just natural analysis of the situation. Oh,
Mm.
if I go out in a t-shirt and it's -4, do you know what? It's going to get cold. Yeah,
Yeah.
your
You
body's
just
going to
need a
know it's going to get
beanie
cold.
because
Yeah,
80% of the heat goes out of your head.
exactly. Or, well, I'll come on to that in a second. That's not essentially 100% accurate for keeping warm, but
No, exactly.
or or you could just look at the app on your phone. You can look
Yeah.
at the app on your phone, or you can go out and experience it.
Yeah.
Now, both of those things are good, but
Yeah.
if you've never experienced going out in the cold and you're
Yeah.
looking at your app saying, "Well, I'm not sure what -3 feels like." It's like,
Mm.
for example, I look at the weather for mountains. I go on mountains quite often,
Yeah.
like hiking and stuff like that. And it's like, oh, -7 today with wind chill.
Yeah.
But unless I've felt what -7 at wind chill feels like, I
Mm.
could look at it and go, oh, it's probably going to be about -7, yeah. But if I've actually um, gone on that day as well,
Mm.
I've got something to attribute to that -7 chill factor.
Yeah.
That next time, if there's something similar, I will remember how that felt and think, do you know what? I actually underprepared there. I didn't have a scarf, or I didn't wear enough layers, or maybe I should have taken some goggles to stop the snow getting sprayed into my eyes, or whatever it's going to be.
Yeah.
So there's got to be an element of learning from others' mistakes through books, through wisdom, through
Mm.
seminars, through lectures, through podcasts, etc.
Yeah.
But there's also got to be an element of acting, because the people who have written down these things
Mm.
have got it from experience. So you can learn from their experience, but you also have to have your own experience, because their experience, let's say, might be outdated,
Yeah.
or your interpretation of that experience is very different once you've actually experienced it yourself, because you can understand why something works
Mm.
than how it works.
Yeah.
Because why something works is completely different to how something works. Like, I understand how a car works,
Mm.
but I don't understand why it works because I'm not a mechanic,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, I've used that example, similar sort of thing. I got a basic idea of how an internal combustion engine works. I don't need to understand all the detail to get from A to B using that car. Yes, and that's where we can speed up the process. We spend, like you say, an analysis paralysis. We're spending so much time trying to understand all the detail, and we don't need that detail. I think your example before of the related weaknesses was really, I love that. I hadn't heard it put that way before, and that helps you focus on what you need to do, which is really great. And also too, I loved what you were talking about this the wind chill factor, because -7 is one thing. -7 with wind chill is a different thing. It's a much colder experience, and if you haven't experienced that, you don't know what that's like. Coming back to your degree, you're at university, and you've studied accounting and finance. Was that something, a choice that you went, okay, I like accounting and finance, or was that something that you had to do? What was the motivation for choosing accounting and finance to study?
Well, I think that depending on your sort of family culture will determine sort of what you will go into. So generally
Mm,
for like Asian families anyway, you'll probably know yourself, engineering,
yeah.
accountancy, doctor, all these sorts of things. I don't think that was necessarily the primary reason, but my dad's a chartered accountant anyway. So I thought, okay, well,
Yeah.
he does well for himself, and maybe that's the avenue I want to go down. But I didn't really know if that was what I wanted to do. So
Mm,
I had really two options. One was psychology, which is something that I'm very passionate about, and it's probably something that I read most about. Even the stuff we talked about so far today, it isn't about the Milgram studies, etc., but there's a psychological sort of element there. If I was doing it based on pure passion, I would have picked psychology.
Yeah.
But when you're younger, you do things based on financial rewards, let's say, or the potential of financial remuneration. And I think that's probably where, I sat really, that you are more likely to earn money as an accountant and financial advisor than you are as a psychologist. Now, that's not necessarily the case. And what I've come to realise, and what the book's essentially about, is that you can look at any industry, those at the top earn loads of money because it's about the value you're bringing to the marketplace. So you're better off being the best assistant football manager in the world than you are being, a second-rate chartered accountant.
Yeah.
So I think that's a common thing I've seen, that many people do the wrong careers or choose it for the wrong reasons. I think if you're gonna, if I was to go back, as we said, psychology probably. Could I still do it now? Potentially. Could do let's say a conversion course psychology, do a doctorate. Is that on the table? Maybe. But again, it's just in the sales. That's only a thought that's come into my mind in the last 3 months, if I'm honest. So again, that's my mind trying to recalibrate everything and just sell, because I'm working as a transformational coach, but my mind saying, well, actually, could you be a clinical psychologist as well, which is quite similar in respect of you're dealing with people and helping them, but it's something that's more medically orientated, let's say. So yeah, I think that's, to answer your question, was my degree passion or something else? It wasn't passion related. It was based on future financial, the potential of future financial income.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I'm just curious about that because I didn't go through that path. I mean, when I was in secondary school, I didn't want to be there. Similar sort of thing to yourself. I was actually very good at school early on, and then I went through a period where I just didn't do things very well. And I didn't want to be at school, but my dad said I wasn't allowed to leave school unless I got a job. And then 2 weeks later, army recruitment people come around the school, and I signed up, and I ended up at the SAS. But that's why I was interested in that process that you went through as to how you selected that, which seems to be, when we look at people at that young age, but we tend to do what is kind of expected of us, even though we're going through a rebellious phase. We tend to fall back to that. But I love the point that you raised, that no matter what career it is or what industry or field that you're in, you can actually make a lot of money, and people that perform really well do make a lot of money in those fields. And because you mentioned that you went into doing accounting, which you said you hated, if I heard that correctly. Was that the case? Was it the similar sort of motivation that you went into accounting because that seemed to be a stable and income earning position? And then what was the transition into financial advice?
Yeah, so what I realised is that accountancy is very monotonous and boring, obviously, as the stereotype suggests. Whereas financial advising is obviously a bit more intimate. It's more people friendly. It's forward thinking, planning, rather than just checking numbers are the same, basically in double entry. So that was the reason for this. But as we've talked about before, you've set the sail on the boat. I was on this journey of doing the degree accountancy, and it's like, well, this direction is no longer any use to me. We can only set this, just a sail a few points. Sometimes we can't always do a complete U-turn, because it's not that simple. You can't always drop everything and go back to square one, because there can be repercussions. There can be things that can go wrong. So sometimes it's just a case of marginally adjusting things as opposed to doing a complete U-turn.
Yeah.
But to bring that back to the school situation, how many people, like you'll know yourself, how many people do you know at school that dropped out of school early and they were really good at something in particular, like music or I don't know, drawing or whatever, and they've done really well for themselves because their parents obviously weren't strict in the regard of you need to stick to education. They sort of let them run their own future, and they've done really well because they did things based on passion and the fact that they were good at something, which I said is the perfect marriage, really. And they've continued with that rather than thinking about financial reward. So I think, well, no, a lot of people do pick certain degrees and things based on financial rewards as opposed to the actual love and affinity for a particular industry or subject.
Yeah, it's amazing, and I think a great example of where you can make money doing everything. Because if you take, for example, a circus, that's not really seen as a high income earning career. But then when you look at Cirque du Soleil, those guys, made a bucket load by doing something unique and doing what they did. And it really showed, for me, that serves as a great example of no matter what it is that you're doing, you can actually, if you find a unique niche, you can actually provide a benefit to people that they're willing to pay a lot of money for. Do you think we need more of that in more of that education to let people know, hey, that's get out there and do what you really love and innovate and things will be okay?
Yeah, absolutely. And when people pay for things, it's a transfer of value, isn't it? It's a transfer of value, whether it's you're saving the money or making the money, and then they pay for the service, whether it's an entertainment thing, whether it's an educational thing. There's loads of different avenues. Is it convenience? Like Amazon's a convenience thing. You get something ordered next day to your house at a good price, convenience, as opposed to going out and going shopping and all that sort of stuff. So what is it? What is the reason for the value?
Yeah.
And sort of coming back to the book, really, that the idea of that book is to show that you need to work hard to become the best. You need to find out what you're actually good at, because there's no point in doing something that you're never gonna be good at. Like, for example, I use the example of a sprinter. I could set the goal of being a professional sprinter and train every day, but I will never be as fast as Usain Bolt because I haven't got the physical attributes in order to get there. So there's got to be there's some there's a crossover or a closeness between delusion and thinking big and dreaming big.
Yeah.
You want to be on the right side of that.
Yeah.
You don't want to be on the wrong side of that. And I can be the world's strongest man. I'm probably not sure of that. I don't think that I've got the natural attributes. I haven't probably got the genetics as well. Which I don't know if I want to go into all that, but there are certain things that you're attuned to and certain things that you aren't attuned to. Again, from the book, it's about setting the right goals, understanding your personality type, of the Myers-Briggs, understanding, are you on the agreeable side or disagreeable side? Are you neurotic or not? Are you extrovert or not? Are you open to new experiences or do you like routine? Are you conscientious? Are you hardworking? Because depending on what you get for those determines, what you're maybe going to be. Are you good at communicating? All these sorts of things, and how do you get better at those areas? Are you good at sales? If not, how do you get better at those things? So yeah, I think, or I know that that's one of the things that I want to see more of, people doing what they were sort of inherently drawn to, let's say.
And is it part two that you need to look at the situation that you're in and adjust to dealing with that? It was interesting. I'm a bit older than I look, and a kid of the '80s, and the Karate Kid movie was big when I was young, and then they've got the re-release of the Cobra Kai series, and I noticed in one of those episodes there was the guy, the Johnny character, that is kind of a bit of a always mucking up and not doing things. And if it's something he didn't like doing, he just didn't do it. And then he had a chat with one of his person that he knew that had a business for a long time, and was talking with him, and the guy in the business says, "Look, I don't really like this business as much, but I've got a family, and that's more important, and I'm doing this for my family, and that's a higher priority that I have, and I find the joy in what I'm doing." Do you think there's an element of that we need to balance out as well? That we need to look. I mean, because at a young age, you think you can do everything, you can go out, but you probably don't have the knowledge to go out and do things. So sometimes you've got to do something to get to somewhere else. And is it a case of finding that what you enjoy about that, taking the Mary Poppins attitude of finding in every job that must be done, there's an element of fun. She quotes that in the show. And if you go back to 1937 with the with Snow White when talk about whistle while you work. Is there a way that you can do that and get those dopamine triggers in your mind so that you actually enjoy what you're doing, but it's leading to a bigger goal?
Well, it depends on the meaning that you're operating under. So again, is it the career or the industry that drives you, or is it a secondary reason? Oh, I'm really loving coming to work because I'm trying to fund a trip for my family, which is again the carrot that you're looking to work for. So yes, you can sort of program your mind in a way to enjoy things that you don't enjoy, but as the saying goes, if you love what you do, you're not going to work a day in your life.
Yeah.
And it comes down to a couple of things. Well, one is what card you mentioned. Does everyone need to play a different hand to an extent? And we've not all been dealt the same cards or the same hand. If you've got a 2 and a smelly 3, you're not going to act in the same way as if you've got a pocket pair of aces in a hand of poker. It's like everyone says that I want to be the next Joe Rogan on a podcast. Okay, cool. Were you previously a UFC commentator? Were you a previously comedian where you've got all these people in your network circle on your phone that you can just ring up and go, yes, Connor, do you want to come on the show? Yeah, see you next week. Fly him out, whatever.
Yeah.
You haven't got the access to that network. So you starting a podcast, it's how can I get a guest on my podcast?
Yeah.
How can I get my show out there on Spotify, YouTube, whatever?
Yeah.
How can I make more episodes? How can I make my questioning techniques better? And then maybe you'll get to a position where you've got 400 episodes, one of them's gone viral, and then you can get on the big guests and try and do it that way. It's not, you can't just message Jordan Peterson and say, hey, George, just fancy coming on the show. You're like, who the fuck are you? Like, you don't get that chance. So it's depending on the card you've been dealt and playing that hand accordingly. And sometimes that means folding the hand in poker. I'm not saying that you need to quit, but some endeavours aren't for everyone. And it's understanding how to maybe to wait for the next hand or whatever. But you also mentioned the kid situation. And there's something called a wheel of life. I don't know if you're familiar with it or not, but in that wheel of life is career, health, family, romance, money, and a few other areas, basically hobbies and interests. All these areas. Now, for a lot of people who are deemed successful, 100% in the career area, but have no friends, no family, no relationships. They don't do any hobbies. They're in poor health, etc. People say they're successful. I'm like, well, they're not really, because they haven't got, it's better to have a 7 out of 10 in all those areas than a 10 in one, if I'm being honest. So again, coming back to the sale situation and reassessing the sale, if you've got a 10 in career but a 0 in relationships, maybe you need to not work less hard, because that's not the right idea, but take a little bit more time off to socialize more and get the romance going, or maybe you need some more time on your hobbies or with family or whatever, because there's got to be some sort of balance there. I feel, and that's where you're going to feel most content, where you can earn a good income, you love what you do, you're in a spiritual frame of mind, you've got time to spend time with your kids, you can spend time on your hobbies, you're in good health, you've got time to go to the gym, all these sorts of things, because that wheel of life is really, really important, and not enough people understand that there are more than one area to life. Because I feel that the way that the world is and the materialistic nature of it currently is that unless the money aspect or career aspect of that wheel is a 10, everyone's discontented, aren't they? I feel.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because I certainly met people like that, but I've also met people, as we mentioned before the start of the show, I'm down at the beach house at the moment, and the people, there's people here that I know, they're not, you wouldn't, if you looked at them, you wouldn't say, oh, they're super wealthy or anything like that. But they're really happy. They go for their walks along the beach. They're just enjoying their life. And I think there's something to be said for that. That just finding what's right for you. Yeah. And but how much of that making yourself, or to feel good, comes down to being to gratitude? Because there's a lot out there about gratitude being beneficial for you. How much of gratitude is an important part to play here?
Gratitude is massive. three things I do more than just these three things, but one sheet of paper I write down in three different columns. One is the goal, like my goals, my short-term, medium-term goals.
Yeah.
I write down some affirmations, and then I write down what I'm grateful for.
Yeah.
So everything that you have, someone else is jealous of. So you've got a beach house.
Yeah.
Someone's jealous of that, even within your friendship circle. You might have your own house. People who are renting are jealous of that. You've got your own dog. People are jealous of that. You have a podcast. Again, people may be jealous of that. So you've got to be grateful for the blessings that you've got, but still have the drive to continue to develop. So yeah, you've definitely got to be grateful for what you've got, because, as I said, someone else, even those close to you, will be jealous of what you have, which means that you should be grateful for it too. And if you think about 5 years ago, this is the way I think of it. Sometimes everyone goes through days that are like, fuck, I need to get better, and things aren't as they should be. But if I think back 5 years ago, I wanted my own house. I wanted to be a speaker on a podcast. Wanted to have my own book out. Wanted to have a dog. All these things, and I've now got all those.
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, maybe the things I want now will happen in 5 years' time. So I've got to be grateful for the things that I've got now, because I did want them in the past. My past self wanted those, so I should be grateful for them now. So yeah, I'm a massive believer in gratitude, because if you're not grateful for things, it's like a habit, isn't it? You will never be grateful. You could have 1 million, and you're like, oh, this wanker's got 2 million.
It's always that.
And you always look at negative. I'll give you a prime example. Like it's called a disease of attitude. Jim Rohn calls it.
Yeah.
So imagine this. Well, use you as an example. You're in your beach house now, aren't you? And before the show, you said, I've got a beautiful view in front of me.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Jim Rohn basically says, don't be the person who complains about the specks on the window, because you could say, beautiful view, but look at that speck on the window. Could you not clean that bird shit? Could you, there's bird, but why, out of everything you could think of, look at that one negative? That's a person who's does not show gratitude. That's a negative person. Doesn't matter what they'll get, they'll always look at the negative, and people who you don't really want to associate with, if I'm honest, because there's always something positive from any situation you can think of, anything.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that, because it's funny that you mentioned about the bird shit, because it's like I've got a balcony here and birds come. I've got kookaburras and magpies that come and they'll eat out of my hand. But they do leave a little bit of a thank you on the, shall we say, which has to be cleaned off every now and then. But it's funny what you focus on, because as you say, that this thing of looking at what other people do, and I guess I think I was quite lucky as a child, because my mum always taught me, don't it doesn't matter what anybody else says, doesn't matter what the opinion of other people is, and I hated that as a kid, because you're always worried about someone hanging it on you. But it was funny. I noticed the other day I was out on the garden, and I'm a bit of a Forrest Gump. You mentioned about having that not isolation. What was the word? Solitude. And I've turned into a little bit of Forrest Gump. I've got myself a self-propelled lawnmower, and I mow the lawn. I just go out and just have that time to myself. I used to have someone do it for me, but now I'm sort of like doing it myself and I probably mow the lawn too much. It's a bit more than it needs to, but just to have that time by myself. And one of the neighbors was walking past and mentioned, you've got the best lawn in the neighborhood. And I'm like, have I? I haven't even noticed. And I literally hadn't looked, even though I drove past all the time. It was only after he said it did I look at other people's lawns, because my focus was just on doing what I'm doing in relation to myself. I don't really care what other people are. I shouldn't say don't care, but I'm not looking at what other people are doing as a gauge of how I'm doing. It's just I'm looking at myself, and it was just interesting that came up and what you're talking about. How do we go back from that? I was fortunate to have that from myself, and it's given me a lot of peace as an adult. I said I hated it when my mum said it as a kid, but as an adult, I don't look at what other people are doing. I'm just looking at myself. But if you're in that situation where you're comparing yourself to other people, how do you stop doing that?
I just think it's best to compare yourself to yourself, because everyone's been given different hands. Yeah. Everyone's got a different story. And I heard something before where it said, if everyone was to put their issues in a pile in the corner, you take yours back in an instant. So you don't know what. You don't know what issues people are dealing with.
Yeah,
and it's like the Stoics say, don't be sort of proud of yourself for what you've got,
Mm.
because there's so much more that you haven't got, basically, if that makes sense. So what you don't have amounts to much more. So the same goes. Like, why are you going to look at everyone else's stuff when you should be focused on your own stuff? If that makes sense. So there's here's a good way to think of it as well. So on most people's phones nowadays, they have like the major 7 deadly sins in apps. So they've got Tinder for lust. They've got like Deliveroo for gluttony. They've got Netflix for sloth. They've got Facebook for envy. They've got Instagram for pride. There is one more there somewhere, but I can't think of it at the moment. LinkedIn for greed. That's it. But for example, comparing yourself to others, the reason I've said that is that Facebook and Instagram predominantly, there's a lot of comparison there, isn't there? Whereby people are showing their best life. There's a lot of jealousy there from people, but what they're not showing is the other side of the coin. Like, I saw a meme the other day where it's an apple in the mirror, and it's a beautiful apple at the front, but when you see the back of the mirror or the back side of it, it's all rotten to the core. So it's very much like that. You know, you can, if you're comparing yourself to the face of it for people, yes, you could be jealous or whatever, but you don't know the deeper insights to that person. So just focus on yourself. You know, if you put more energy into focusing on yourself, you'll get a lot further than you will judging everyone else and talking about everyone else. Because there's 3 types of people in the world. There's those that talk about others, those that talk about events or things, and those that talk about ideas. Yes, we all spend time doing all 3. People can say, I've never spoken about other people, but that's bullshit. But why not try and spend most of your time talking or thinking about ideas instead?
No, good
because
point.
then you're going to spend less time talking about people and judging yourself against what other people have. And again, why compare yourself to someone else when they're completely different to you are? It's like you comparing a lion to a dog. They're just completely different. So appreciate them for what they are, and understand how you can get yourself to the best that you can be.
Good point. With things to achieve in life as well, for me, I always believe that things are relatively easy in the sense of, or simple might be the better word. There's a simple set of instructions, and you deal with finances and you've dealt with a lot of people. For example, to have money, one thing the first thing to earn money is you add some sort of value, whether that's as an employee or as a business, you find an area to add value. Simple instruction in my mind. And then to have wealth, you keep a surplus of what you earn. You invest that surplus, and then you reinvest the income you get from that surplus. And that's not a new idea. If you go back to a lot of religions is in there, but if you were even nearly 100 years ago, George S. Carlson wrote the book, The Richest Man in Babylon. That's a fairly simple set of instructions in my mind, to do. So really, we all should be fairly wealthy if we followed that. But people don't follow that, even though that knowledge is there. What do you think it is that stops people from following fairly simple instructions?
Like you said, The Richest Man in Babylon there, that's something, because I'm a big advocate for Jim Rohn. He talks about that book and mentioned it at one of his lectures and said, well, I guarantee 99% of you aren't going to go away and read it, even though I've mentioned it. And it comes down to, you know, you thought, yes, you're talking about saving and investing, but most income actually comes from your primary job or your primary value bringer. So many people are frustrated because they are looking for an above average job with above average pay without being an above average person. Again, to quote the great late Jim Rohn. So instead, why don't we actually continue to provide value? Because if you could save where the business that you work for now, if you could make them £10 million with your idea, do you not think they'll give you a pay rise? Yes, they ain't going to give you all of it because it's their business, but they'll definitely give you a pay rise. So giving
value, the thing that
gives
says if you work an extra hour a week, you actually get a 40% differential income. It's like the scale is so massive, and it doesn't take much effort. So that's what always fascinated me. Coming back to that question is what do you think it is that people just, why don't they get it? It just seems so simple in my mind.
It is, but as with the normal distribution, bell curve, Pareto principle, whatever you want to look at, most people don't do basic things. You know,
Why?
most
Why do
people
you
are
reckon
average.
that is? What is
Most
it?
people are average intelligence. Most people have average intelligence. Most people are average normal
Yeah.
human beings. For there to be the exceptional people, there has to be normal people and subnormal people.
Yeah.
So the first step is to actually want to change.
Yeah.
You've got to want to. You mentioned Dale Carnegie, didn't you, at the start, or
Yeah.
off air? You've got
Yeah.
to want to ask the question: how do I win friends and influence people?
Yeah.
How do I get better at sales? How do
Mm.
I become successful? How do I invest my money? What are my skills? Or all these sorts of things. You have to be able
Mm.
to ask those questions first, because without that, no one's going to come and tell you. You need to. Well, some people do. Don't get me wrong, but you need
Yeah.
to read this book, and then you need to do this. This is your plan. You need to actually get the initiative. Is probably the number one word. Actually,
Mm.
initiative. You need to have the initiative to want to do something.
Yeah.
Because I've got loads of friends, acquaintances, whoever. Some people have
Mm.
got the drive to
Yeah.
want to continue to improve. They're always asking questions. What should I do here? They ask people of expertise, and then they implement that and keep changing. Other people just do the same shit they've always done and will always continue to do. The Again, there's a phrase to sum this up. It's like uh, something along the lines of like delusion is where you continue to do the same thing and expect different results. Or insanity, I think it was Newton or Einstein
Yeah, it
that
was
said it.
Einstein. Yeah, doing the
Einstein, yeah,
same thing, expecting a different result is a definition
that's
of
it.
insanity. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, so it's like that. So if you're doing the same things and getting the same results,
Mm.
why not change? Again, most people aren't spending enough time in solitude, aren't spending enough time strategizing, aren't spending
Mm.
enough time doing introspective work, aren't asking themselves the right questions to actually change a direction.
Yeah.
Simple as that. Simple
Do
as
you
that.
think?
Because so go on.
I was going to say, do you think that links back to their beliefs that that opportunity is available to them? Because I often wonder, is it a case of, and as you're aware, your beliefs shape who you are, and your reticular activating system is the filter that is set by your beliefs. So the people that have really strong beliefs that this is all that I have, this is my life, my lot that I'm stuck with. So the reticular activating system blocks out that, because like you said, Jim Rohn said, here's the richest man in Babylon. Most of you won't read that, even though they've heard it. I mean, how often have we done this where we've been looking for something and we look in ridiculous places like the fridge and the freezer and in the washing basket, and there it is right on the desk in front of us. We've walked past it many times, but we didn't see it because our reticular activating system blocked it. Do you think that's part of that process where it's their belief system that's actually, even though they've heard it, it's been said to them, but they haven't heard it because it's been blocked from coming into their mind because of their beliefs and their reticular activating system filtering?
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll come on to what the fears and why that happens in a minute, but I'll use two examples. So when they train elephants, you mentioned circus before, they tie
Mm.
when they're babies, they tie like string to them
Yeah.
and they can't move. And then when they grow up to be big elephants,
Yeah.
like 20-ton elephants or whatever they weigh,
Yeah.
they still are trained in that way.
Yeah.
And it's so powerful when you, as you said, have certain limiting beliefs,
Mm.
you will always act in such a way.
Yeah.
So this is where the questioning again comes into.
Mm.
Why do I have this belief, and what would a better belief be? How can I reprogram this mainframe to get me the best opportunity? Now, maybe again, some of that is back to school and issues with school, because what school teaches is repeat exactly what you learn and you will be successful.
Yeah.
Failure is a bad thing when it's not, because you have
No.
to fail to succeed.
Yes.
Working with other people is cheating. When actually networking and working with other people is how you get things done. So for those people who were programmed by that school environment in those three ways are going to be the ones that fail or don't do well, because they don't want to try stuff because they're going to fail. They repeat what they hear from the news, from general mainstream, and they don't want to work with others. They are individualist. So those three collective and not challenging the narrative and not asking questions, all those four things means that they're not going to ever get out of their own sort of habit or routine. So again, what does that come down to? Does that come down to one of the major fears? Do you have fear of failure? Yes, as we just mentioned. Do you have imposter syndrome? Yes, because you don't feel that you're anyone special. Do you have the fear of success? Yes, because you don't see yourself as a successful person. Do you have fear of being judged? Probably, because you feel that you need to be true to who you were as a kid, because that's who you are. No, because that is an external locus of control as opposed to an internal locus of control. There's many things that I feel keep people in that frame. But as I said, not everyone can be successful, because for everyone to be successful means that some people have to be unsuccessful. But these conversations really, Damien, are for those people who are in that small percentage of people that want to change. Because as Jim Rohn said, you can tell people this is a way to win the lottery. You'll probably get a lot more people sign in, because it's a cheat way, isn't it? It's a cheat way. It's an easy way. When you tell people the hard facts, people want to tune out because it's not easy. And yeah, it's not a good thing. But I just hope more people come to the realization, like I have. But even then, I still think there will be some people who go through life never coming to any realization, because again, they are so within their own programming and so ignorant. Like, I'm sure you've had conversations, Damien, with people, and you've tried to tell them something or say something to them, and they just completely shut you out and say, no, this is how things are. And they're so sort of narrow-minded that that even if you did do the inception and ask them questions and get through to them, they're still going to revert back to their old ways at some point. I just know people like that, and they will always be the same. But for other people with a growth mindset rather than a fixed mindset, will change.
What you mentioned there is exactly right. The biggest part of my job, certainly in the corporate world where I'm dealing with the clients, is not so much the knowledge. It's convincing people of areas outside of their knowledge. And I had one experience where the director, the company was in financial difficulties. It had gone through rapid growth from 35 million to 110 million turnover, but as a result of that, they hadn't changed their systems. And there are different systems you need at that level. There's roughly 25 million to 50 million you need to change your systems. 50 million to 100 million you need to change your systems to adjust to that size of company. And they hadn't done that. They went from 35 to 110, and as a result they lost a lot of money, and they're in this really difficult situation. And there was one client where they could have got about $8 million from. They just had to finish a report and send it off. Well, I finished the report for them and gave it to one of the directors and said, here, it's done, you just need to sign this, read it, sign it, and send it off. Well, for 3 weeks he didn't. I think it was at least 3 weeks. He just didn't do it. And I wanted to hold it in front of him and say, here, read it. And as a result of that, didn't do it. And the company actually went under because there's key things that were right there in front of them that they could have done and didn't do. And I was just wondering about that. Is this part of this need? We talked about beliefs, and as you're all very aware, belief is just a thought you've repeated over and over again. Is it the case of this need that we have to be part of the tribe, going back to conditioning that we've had for survival, that we need to be part of the tribe, hence we need to listen to the news every day? And I shut off the news a long time ago. I've lived through, I don't know how many recessions I've lived through. I've never experienced it because I never watched the news and didn't even know we were in it initially. And it didn't affect me because that wasn't my focus. Do you think it's that part of that is that deep conditioning that we've got to be that we need to be part of the tribe for survival, and we're scared to step out of that, and that's what stops a lot of people from say switching off the news or switching off the alerts on their phone, that kind of thing?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you give the example that you mentioned with the gentleman that you were talking to, for him, he sounds like he had a fear of being judged by others and the fear of being wrong in either circumstance. And it also sounds to me like he had a cynical nature, that people were inherently bad and all they wanted to do is sell him this thing and give him a solution that might cost him money. And I think that again is its own belief that can lead to bad things, because even if you've had bad experience with people, if you've got an innate belief that people are inherently good and people are trying to provide value, you'll act in a much better fashion than always believing people are out to get you. So absolutely, it all comes down to mindset. It all comes down to belief. And again, questions and also statements change your opinion. Like if you tell yourself, I'm actually quite a lazy person. I'm quite stubborn. I'm quite messy. I'm actually quite dumb as well, and I'm unhygienic, and yeah, I'm just not very clever. If you tell yourself that over and 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 over again, you will become stubborn, smelly, etc.
Yeah.
I've read a book once that said that a good way to manage people is to tell them what you want them to be, sort of thing. So you say, instead of like clean your room, you say, like, thanks for being such a clean person. And they will behave like that, if that makes sense. Thank you for being the best member of the team. And then, and in their mind, they're like, oh, I'm the best member of the team. I should therefore behave like that.
Yeah.
So it's like an affirmation. If you tell yourself, look, I'm a strong person, I learn from my mistakes. I'm a successful person. I educate myself daily. I continue to improve. I am aiming for X, Y, and Z. If you tell yourself that, you already can tell the difference in my voice, that you feel more like empowered to change.
Yeah.
Our mind does want to tell us the negative, like you said about the tribe situation. That's how our sort of mind is programmed, to look at the negative and to try and avert from danger. This is why it's very important for us to sort of flick the switch. So another example I've used before is, like, if your car breaks down on your drive, you could, well, obviously the first thing you're going to feel is like, fuck, my car's broken down, so I can't pay money, can't travel. But again, you could look at the positive, saying it was going to break down anyway. It could have broke down in the middle of the outback for you guys, and you would have been screwed.
Near the bush that we
so
have.
Yeah, exactly. So at least it's broken down here at home, where I'm not stuck in the middle of nowhere with no signal on my phone, with no water, whatever. So again, you can look at the positive. So it's not what happens to you, it's how you view things that's important.
Yeah, that's really important that you said that, because I know from my life, what you're saying there is, you focus on the things that are working and encourage that, because it seems to be there's this shift from what I've seen is a shift. Before it was like, you get I remember when I went in primary school, you actually got the strap if you did something wrong. Now, I'm not saying we should go back to that, but there's an element of positive reinforcement as well, reinforcing the behaviours that you want. And I know from my perspective, every day, at the end of every day, I feel really great. And partly because I look at my day and I have a big list of things that I want to get done on that day, and there's no way I'm going to get them all done. But it's in priority, as you mentioned before. Talk about, you mentioned about the related weaknesses. From my side of things, when I schedule my day, it's the most important thing that I need to get done to move me to where I want to get is the first thing that I do, and I work through that process. And at the end of the day, I don't look at it and go, oh, I didn't get this done and didn't get that done, of the things that were not possible for me to get done. I look at the things I did do and say, oh, that's great, I did this, I did that, and I focus on the things that I did do, and consequently I feel great every day because of that. Is that, but I understand how dopamine works, and I make sure that I set myself up to do that. If someone's not aware of that, is there a process that they can go through to switch and set themselves up in that way?
Well, there's two processes. One is about what you said with the goal setting. So one is, we're going to talk about the mind side, but also the actual to-do list side, because I think is really good. So something I learned from Brian Tracy, you mentioned that you do your most important tasks first, and then go through. So something that I talked about in the book as well. Brian Tracy basically said that you need to label your tasks A to E. A is obviously mandatory tasks. B is your second-rate tasks. C is your could-do tasks. D is your delegate tasks. And E is your eliminate tasks. So what tends to happen is people procrastinate, and they'll go for C, D, and E tasks first because they're easier. Where, if you need to do a task that's going to bring you in money or get you up to the next level, they're the ones that you should be doing first. So I think it's great that you do that. In terms of the focus part, we need to look at what we want rather than what we don't want. So the age-old adage is, don't think of a pink elephant. You think of a pink elephant. The reason that works is because I'll use two examples. If you're looking to achieve something, you can say, I don't want something in order to get you somewhere, but you can also say, I just want to get there. So as an example, it's more powerful to say, I want a relationship rather than I don't want to be single. Because when you say I don't want to be single, you're still thinking about being single.
Yeah.
If you say I don't want to smoke anymore, again, you're still thinking about smoking rather than I want to be fit and healthy. Oh, I don't want to be fat. I want to be athletic. It's just so simple, but we tend not to do it a lot. You know, I don't want to be lonely. No, I want to be social. Okay, well, if you want to be social, what do you need to do? That's the reason why that works. Because if you say I don't want to be fat, I don't want to be single, there's no like actionable steps. Like if you say I want a relationship or I want to be athletic, your mind automatically thinks, okay, I want to be athletic. What do athletic people do? They go to the gym, they do this, they do this. If you want a relationship, okay, that means I need to find a girlfriend. I need to, I don't know, date her, live with her for a bit and do it that way. So it makes more actionable steps. You know, instead of I don't want to work here anymore.
Yeah.
What have you talked about other than working there? Nothing. Instead, I want to find a job doing, I want to start a podcast. I want to start a business. I want to travel. Whatever it is, you have to tell your mind what you want. When you tell you what you don't want, you just focus on that. And, you know, if you're hungry, starving, all you're ever going to focus on is food. There could be $100 million in the corner, but if you're literally an inch away from death and there's water and food, you're not even going to see the $1 million.
Yeah.
So it's like that. You know, what you focus on and what you need to have is what's important.
From what you're saying there too, as I understand it, the unconscious mind doesn't know how to not do something. You mentioned that before, don't think of a pink elephant. It has to think of it to reference what it is to know what to not think about, which means that that's expanding in your mind. And what you're saying there is be clear about what it is that you're focusing on. Is that a case? Is it as simple as that? As just writing out, okay, I want a relationship and defining what that is, and doing it that way. Is it that simple?
Well, it's not that simple because it is that simple and it's not that simple. Yeah. I mean, by just saying those things alone is not enough. I could say I want a relationship and keep saying that every day. That's not enough. But what it does do is it changes the trajectory of your actionable points later on.
Yeah.
And then you have to go ahead and act on that. Like, again, I want to start a business. That gives you the idea to start a business, which means that, okay, what's the next part? I need to do this. I need to think of a name. I need to do this.
Yeah.
So that's why it's powerful, because it gives you more impetus to actually start doing something. That's why I think it's a way to try and short circuit your brain into acting quicker than saying, I don't want this, I don't want this, I don't want this, and getting into a more of a negative state.
Yeah, and does that work? I mean, because I look at it, you mentioned about smoking, and I know this with a lot of people that I know that tried to quit smoking and weren't able to do it because their focus was, I don't want to smoke. And like, well, you're thinking about smoking, whereas I've smoked in my life, and whenever I wanted to smoke, I just said, I'm going to be healthy. And immediately just stopped, and it wasn't an issue. But I think we've all had that experience too, where we said, I don't want to forget something, and you go ahead and forget it because that's what you've taught your mind. Whereas I try and say, well, I do when I want to remember something, I say we need to remember this, and I'm yet to think of a time where I actually forgot something when I said I was trying to remember it, because your unconscious mind actually attracts those kind of things as to what you think about, doesn't it? Do you want to talk through that a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. It's subconscious mind is an amazing thing. It's something that we don't 100% really understand, but it's something that governs everything about you. It governs the conversation we're having now. It governs your dreams. It governs your reflexes. Like if a car was to pull out in front of you, your subconscious mind will still be in action. You can be walking down the road like everyone is now on their phone, and you still know someone's coming nearby, and look up and move around. So if it can understand all that information and every other bit of information that you've ever come across, is there not a way that you can put information into the garden? Like you talked about gardening off air, didn't you? And plants. When you have a plant, you need to feed it the right compost. You need to water it enough. It needs to get the right sunlight, etc. Because without that, weeds grow by default. It's very much the same. So what can we plant in our subconscious that's going to develop into something that will provide or bring something of value later on? Because people have talked about this all the time. What's the difference between the top one player in the world and top five player in the world?
Yeah,
It's generally just mentality and attitude. There's not generally that much difference between. There are obviously some exceptions to the rule, but a lot of the time there's not actually huge differences between the two players. It's just the mentality and how they see things, and that comes down to maybe the programming of the subconscious mind that then moves into the conscious mind at a later date, and vice versa, because they do have a relationship, and that's why affirmations are good. Because if you tell yourself, like you said a minute ago, I'm healthy, your body then wants to behave in such a way.
Yeah,
It's how I started smoking as well. I said, look, I'm an athlete. Because I started doing judo. I'm an athlete now. Athletes don't smoke. Instead of I'm trying to stop, I'm stopping smoking, whatever. So yeah, subconscious is massive, and it can help shape your entire life. And the thing is, without, like we said about the weeds growing, if you're oblivious or ignorant to the fact that you have control over your own mind to an extent, yeah, obviously you can't control everything that's going on, but you can have some element of control, then you will just become the average person of all the information you have been forced to consume and the people around you. Whereas if you can actually control what you consume in terms of information, in terms of speaking to the right people, in terms of friendship circles, all of these sorts of things, they add up over time. Because if you have 5 good, ambitious friends as opposed to 5 heroin addicts, let's say, it's going to be a completely different situation. If you're consuming good content on YouTube and TV and podcasts and books than watching The Simpsons on rerun, again, over a period of time, all that information goes into your subconscious and changes your behavior over time.
Yeah.
It might not be an immediate return. Like if you start the gym today, by tomorrow you're not going to have a 6-pack.
Yeah, that's.
But over a period of time, that's when the results will show. So you have to be disciplined in order to do that. And the same with like trying to reprogram your subconscious mind by feeding it with, as you said, your own sort of speech to it, like internal self-talk, which was called in Think and Grow Rich, autosuggestion, I believe. Autosuggestion, where you're telling your mind certain things. And as I said, it sometimes takes time to develop, but it's definitely worth doing it.
And do you think focus happens with that? Because from my experience years ago, I used to read a lot of books and I noticed, I was getting a lot of knowledge to a degree, but I really wasn't making much change. So I was reading all these books and going, and I could recite what I'd read, but it really hadn't been incorporated. Now, as I look back, it hadn't been incorporated at an unconscious level. What I realized, well, from my experience, was to change what I was doing. So I actually, rather than reading more books, I just read the same book over and over again until I actually integrated it. And one of my favorites was, my favorite was How to Be a No Limit Person by Wayne Dyer. And I've still listened to that book. I've got the audio version and I love listening to that and just reminding myself of that. But is that something that can help speed up that process rather than just taking lots of random information? Well, even it might be be focused to a degree, but it's still lots of information but actually picking something, integrating that well, and then moving on to the next thing. Do you think that's a quicker way of approach?
Well, I mean, look at two things. One, religion. People who recite the same verses over and over again, they know it off heart. They read the Bible, they read the Quran, they read any other religious book you can think of. The other example is Bruce Lee, who said, I fear the man who practices one kick 1,000 times rather than 1,000 kicks once. So are you sort of reading 1,000 books and not consuming you're consuming, 0.5% of all of them? Yeah. Or are you specialist in a few areas? And I'm exactly the same. I generally try and consume the same content. Like I listen to a lot of Stoicism. I listen to a lot of stuff about psychology and mentality, and just literally the same shit over and over again. And people just probably think I'm a bit mental, but it takes time for, as you said, to absorb the information and really understand the information at like a deep subconscious level, as opposed to being jack of all trades, master of none to an extent. So
Yeah.
I'm exactly the same. Yes, it's nice to read new books, but a lot of the books actually have a lot of crossover, don't they? They might be on the same topic,
Well, there's
and they sort
fundamental
of talk about the same
principles,
area.
really, isn't there?
Yeah. I mean, there's not really that many more principles to incorporate, but sometimes because you're reading the words in the same way, or you're hearing it audiobook the same way, you then start remembering it. Like, I don't know how many phrases I've run off today, from Jim Rohn and to Stoics, etc. A lot of that has come from the fact that I've listened to Jim Rohn hundreds of times. I've listened to Stoic quotes from like Seneca, Aurelius, Epictetus, and Plato, Aristotle, all these guys so many times that like I sort of know either the gist of it or them word for word.
Yeah.
And as you said, that then is a case of going into the subconscious. And again, boxers, judokas, footballers, whatever, they'll practice the same thing over and over and over and over and over again to really make a change. And this is where like win instead of quitting, quitters never win.
Yeah.
The situation where people are like, I've read all these books, I've read 10 books this year and nothing's happened.
Yeah.
But you need to read them more, or you need to do it again. And that's where, I try to incorporate, because obviously when you write a book, you're reading a lot. Like they say, the best way to learn is to teach, and the best way to teach is to learn. So, so same thing. Like I wrote the book, and I learned a lot by doing that. I tried to summarize all these sort of areas into one, like the Think and Grow Rich information, Brian Tracy, Jim Rohn, all these kind of Dale Carnegie, all these kind of books into sort of one easy to read manual that's quite simple, because you need to, as you said, keep ingesting the information so that it actually makes a difference. It's like if you eat protein once in a year, it's not going to make a difference. But if you eat protein every day, the muscles show, and it's the same with the brain muscles.
Yeah, you mentioned the book, and let's get into the book. The motivation for writing the book, because you say you decided to write the book, and I'm reading it from the book now. You decided to write the book to assist you becoming a more polished person, the best person that you can be, to give you some direction in your life. So I wanted to get into a little bit of the background of the book, but also your book is quite unique in the sense of you bring so many different things together into one area. I mean, you cover from self-improvement, you talk about motivation, goals, you even talk about sales, time management, negotiation, limiting beliefs, faith, purpose, gratitude. What was the motivation for writing the book and then bringing together all these different elements? Why did you decide to bring all that together in one?
Well, sort of what we just talked about really is that I'd consumed a lot of information from different sources, philosophy, the psychological books, Think and Grow Rich, as you said, Dale Carnegie, etc. And what I noticed was that it wasn't just the subconscious work that's going to get you somewhere. It wasn't just the setting goals that was going to get you somewhere. It wasn't just motivating yourself to get out of bed in the morning. It wasn't just how your mornings were going to work. It was actually all of those things together that made the big difference.
Yeah.
So, people say, oh, well, I don't need to know sales. Well, how are you going to sort of sell yourself in inverted commas to your other partner or your other half? How are you going to sell yourself to an employer? You've done it before when you've gone for interview. You make yourself look as attractive as possible. You make your CV look nice and flowery, let's say.
Yeah.
You talk well, you dress well. That's all sales. You communicate well. You have to have a strategy, don't you? You've got to have a strategy in terms of how things are going. And the reason that I sort of wrote the book, to answer your question more directly, is that I realised that all these parts, there was like a common theme, that it was about trying to be your best self, but that encompassed all these parts together. So that's why I wrote the book, for not only my benefit, because I was actually looking for a book that covered all these areas. Because as I said, I wrote Think and Go Rich, I read all these books. And I was like, well, I want one that's sort of like a summary of all these books in one, to an extent. I was like, there's not one. And again, looking at mentality here, turning a problem into a solution, not a problem of, I can't find this book. A solution is, well, maybe I should write the book.
Yeah.
So that's essentially where that came. And hopefully there's been some people have found some value there. I know there's been some good reviews on Amazon. People said they've finally decided to go for the business that they've always wanted to, and yeah, so it's always nice to provide value to the world, and I just did it based on that, really.
Right, awesome. Because it brings together so many different things, which, as you mentioned, it's you can be really good at one area, but if you don't have all those other areas working well, you mentioned the circle of life before. If you've got that balance happening, then you perform much better when all of that wheel. If it's a wheel, if your wheel is a circle, it's going to roll better than if there's a lump in it because some area is not. To use that analogy. You've also
Exactly.
gone and become, a transformational coach. What was the motivation to do that? And do you want to talk a little bit about the work that you do and the services that you offer?
Yeah, so I think it was, again, if you look at, sometimes things happen in your life that sort of determine a direction. So again, as I said, I had the interest in psychology, and I started doing a lot of reading on that front, and actually managed to change my own life to an extent, from someone who was underachieving and drinking, going out, messing around, someone who now is on the right trajectory, let's say.
Yeah.
So I decided I was helping obviously people around me to change themselves, and someone said to me, well, you should start doing this as a job, because you've managed to help change me. You've written books and stuff. So yeah, that's sort of where I started to go. And in terms of the services, it's very much as we've sort of discussed today, where it's trying to understand the person at a deeper level, understand what type of person they are, what they're trying to achieve, what's holding them back in terms of psychology, what steps they need to do in actually order to get to the goals that they need, what areas are they falling short on in terms of areas of life, because it might be that they're having family situation issues or career issues or whatever it's going to be. How can they sort of manage their situation better in order to achieve those aims? What shortfalls have they got in certain areas? What fears have they got? Is it fear of failure that they that's holding them back? Fear of being judged by others. The fear of being judged by others, a really nice point is that, if you wouldn't take advice from this person, why do you care about what they think about you? I think that's a really powerful one, because, a guy, John, from school, who they used to know, they're thinking about, well, how's he going to view my post? Does that guy give a shit, really? Why do you care about that? It's holding you back. So yeah, coaching is about, as I said, people coming in to say, I feel that I need to help with this, and then we get to talk about it, because it's not like a mentor where I'm telling you should be going, as I said, to live in New York and do this. It's me trying to find out exactly what is in that subconscious and what you really want, and helping you get there. So I'm actually offering free consultations at the moment, just for initial chat, because it might be that we're not an ideal fit for each other, which is fine. But those are, we do offer packages as well.
Yeah. Okay. So, and what do you think is the key things that, if you were to nut it down to a couple of key things that people are being held back by, what would those be? So
yeah, as we said, the fears are really big, and it's trying to, we can talk about the fears at a general level, but it's specifics of what that means for them that's important. So fear of success, fear of failure, the imposter syndrome, fear of being judged by others, and it's really addressing the root cause of what those are, and how we can change those beliefs. Or is it the self-esteem issue? Is it the limiting beliefs in terms of what you can achieve? Because if Joe Schmo can achieve it, why can't you? Oh, well, I don't see myself as that kind of person. Well, why not?
Yeah.
Because of this. Well, do you feel that your past is necessarily a reflection of your future? All these sorts of things. So it's really trying to challenge the viewpoint of people and change it in a positive way for them, by them agreeing to that being the case, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. So do you mostly work with people one-on-one, or do you do group sessions? What are if you want to expand on those services? And you said you're offering people a free initial consultation. But do you normally work one-on-one, or do you have group sessions? Is there courses that you offer? You've obviously got the book that they can read. Do you want to talk a little bit about those services?
Yeah, so at the moment it's just one-on-one. Maybe in the future there will be group services, but I think that one-on-one's a lot better, because what tends to happen is that people open up more on a one-to-one basis. As we talked about earlier, with the school situation where people are scared to put their hand up and ask questions, people definitely aren't going to talk about that situation in more depth if they are in a group setting, because it is a little bit similar to therapy in some respects in terms of you're trying to address an issue. So yeah, that's what I would say, is that individual is better because it is better for the individual. Obviously, for coaches, it's probably better to have 100 people in a room, isn't it? For obvious reasons, but it's for the individual that it needs to be best placed, and that's better on an individual setting.
Yeah. Okay. And what's the best way for people to reach you? We'll put all the details in the show notes as well, but do you want to just recite them while we're going here?
Yeah. So Vanquish Transformational Coaching is obviously the first way. You can get a copy of the book, with obviously the second book coming out. Got an Instagram page, Vanquish Transformational 2022. And as you said, yeah, they'll probably, all the links will be left on the notes. Yeah.
And you mentioned the second book there. Do you want to talk us through that book, what that's about, so people can have that anticipation for what's coming?
So we talked, didn't we, about having deadlines, and it was meant to be ready for the end of last year, if I'm honest. But as we said before,
books don't go that way, though.
Yeah, well, this is it. And life doesn't know. You've got to set goals, because the reason that it's probably almost ready now is because I set that goal of it being ready at the end of the year. If I didn't set a goal for when it was ready, it might not be ready for 2-3 years. So you've got to set, deadlines that make you at least try to work towards. So basically, the book is different to the first one, where the first one is about different ways to improve on yourself. This one is much more of a questioning book. So it's a question every day for the full year.
Yeah.
So the first question might be that, where do you want to be in 3 to 5 years? You write down your answer, and then there will be input from me about, as we said, about the wheel of life. Have you thought about career? Have you thought about what you want from a relationship perspective, etc., etc., etc.? Then there's another section for you to write down your answer, and then actionable points. Okay. Second question might be, okay, well, based on my personality type, what would be my ideal career? Or what would I do every day if money wasn't an issue? What do I like about living in the location that I'm in? Of my friends, which are deal friends, which are real friends? Deal friends being those based on utility or enjoyment, because a lot of people, they have friends that they just go out for drinks with, or that you use each other for things. So you give me lifts, I'll get you beer, whatever it's going to be. So loads of questions like that are deeply introspective, that will maybe help give you some deeper insight into your own self, and obviously future planning as well. So quite excited about this one. I'm going to use it myself as well once it's all officially done, and maybe I'll get some answers for myself as well.
Love that. That's awesome. Looking forward to seeing it when it comes out. Jeevan, do you want to share, a couple of your, as we wind up, do you want to share a couple of your key wisdoms, or it can be one or many, up to you, key wisdoms that you would like people to take away from this?
Yeah, I think that we need to try and visualize who we want to become, and then act into that person. And as I said, we need to be realistic about this. You can't, if you're 5'3", determine that you're going to be a world champion sprinter. It's not going to happen. Let's understand who we are as a person. What are our interests? What are we good at? What do we get compliments on? Because people don't give compliments out lightly. If you're getting compliments about the same thing over and over again, it's people trying to tell you, look, you should be doing this. You should be doing this. So, maybe that could be your focus, and maybe that's something that you can pursue. And you need to think not about the money side, but about what value you're going to bring to the table. Because if you focus on the value first, money will come. Money will come. Simple as that.
Yeah, great advice. Jeevan, it's been such a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you for all the wonderful advice. And everybody, grab Jeevan's book. It's on Amazon. The links will be in there. It's a fabulous book, integrating so much detail into one spot. Jeevan, pleasure being on the show. Thank you. Hopefully we can have a chat again in the future.
Thank you very much for having me, Damien. It's been a great show. And looking forward to it.
Thank you for being part of the eSHAIR.care community and helping people around the world prosper. You're creating a bigger pie for everyone to share. The more people contributing to the world being a better place, the better the world becomes, for others and for you.